Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 838, we've got lots to talk about. It's actually 15 years since the release of Vista, so Richard's got a little bit to talk about on that. Going to the other end of the scale, we've got new updates coming for Windows 11 this month, and we're going to be talking about what's included in those updates and the beta and dev releases for Windows inside this week. Updates for the Surface Duo 2 that are worth talking about. Power toy updates, new Surface hardware being available to pre-order in the UK, and lots more. So let's get to Richard and Garry. Richard, good evening.
Good evening.
Good to be back. I think Garry should be joining us shortly, but we're going to make a start without him this week. We can talk about him now before he gets here. Quite a busy week, quite a few bits and pieces we've got to talk about this week. We've got new insider builds, power toys, Panos Panay's blog post.
Yep, a new era.
A new era, yep. So there's quite a few interesting things around this week. Oh yeah, and an anniversary you've just reminded me of that. Well, that does actually make me feel old. So we'll start with the anniversary. What's the anniversary this week?
Well, of course, it was 15 years ago last weekend, as we record, that Windows Vista got released, the follow-up to Windows XP.
Wow, and that shows you how long we've been doing this, because that was a new thing. We talked about that as being released, so we were still talking about XP when we were doing this podcast. Yeah,
because Vista included all the media center stuff built in, didn't it? Whereas XP, it was very much a bolt-on midway through the life cycle. But Vista, it was out of the box, along with many other things that maybe made people less happy. Yes.
Well, yeah, you could do a whole show on Vista in itself, couldn't you? Especially if we could, that might be an actual interesting thing. If we can get someone that's not particularly NDA'd up, that we could get to talk about the inside track of Vista, that would be amazing. Because that is a story in its own right. Having lived through it, because we didn't get, Microsoft were a lot more, I wouldn't say secretive, but they didn't give the builds away the same way as they do now. It wasn't weekly builds back with the Vista Day, was it? There was
no
public milestone builds. I think there was only 3 or 4 with Vista.
Yeah, it wasn't really until Windows 10 that we began to get the full insider track. Before but Vista was particularly secretive. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, because it hasn't got a good reputation, let's face it. But I don't think it was that bad. I just think it was marketed really badly, and people put it on machines that it really couldn't run on.
Yeah, absolutely. At the time, because like I said, we were doing the show then, and I always liked it. It was a nice upgrade. You mentioned about Media Center. Beforehand, you could only get Media Center through MSDN.
Yeah.
Then suddenly it was, it was a consumer part. There was, it had a nice overhauled user interface that we got to see. But yeah, the actual finished product itself was good if you ran it on decent hardware. I remember running it on some hardware that was decent hardware at the time. I think I got one lent to me from Microsoft that was actually quite decent, and it ran brilliantly.
Well, yes, exactly. I think as long as one ran it on hardware not recommended by Microsoft as the minimum spec, it was fine. It's where people ran it on machines that were quite happy running Windows XP, and they tried to run Vista on them, and it didn't go quite so well for people. Yeah,
there was. I think that one of the biggest mistakes they made was the Vista compatible, Vista ready stickers.
Yes. Oh, yes. I'd forgotten about those. Yeah, that was a disaster, wasn't it? And marketing, just an absolute fiasco. Because, it's a, and yet they didn't seem to learn it when we saw the Windows RT. Users still got confused as to what they're actually buying.
Yeah, and so if anybody doesn't remember, I think it was Vista Ready supported the Aero and I think it was a gig of RAM minimum, and the graphics drivers supported the translucence or the transparency effects and that kind of thing. And then Vista Ready didn't support anything, and it had the horrible Vista Basic user interface, 512 meg of RAM. I remember seeing PCs being sold in PC World with 512 RAM, and then thinking, God, this is not going to go well. And surprisingly, it didn't.
No, not at all. No, it's but of course, we always forget, but Windows 7, which everyone then loved, was kind of Windows Vista, except with a few tweaks. because Windows Vista had done all the groundwork in forcing companies to move drivers, and the underlying architecture was all changed. And so I think Windows 7 then came along and reaped the rewards.
Yeah, because it did have, what was that? Oh, something project. Oh, I've forgotten it. It just where they did like a scene where they did consumer feedback with Vista, but they branded Mojave Project.
Oh yes, Mojave. Oh, crikey. Yes.
So they branded it as something else and said, "Look what we've done to Windows, and isn't it much better now?" And sort of the consensus was, "Yeah, it's great. It's much better." Of course, it wasn't. It was just a rebrand.
Yeah.
Was that the era of the Bill Gates churro adverts at CES?
Oh crikey! I don't know.
It was. Yeah, I remember watching it. So it was one of the Vista launch that I went to the Vista launch at CES. As a guest of Microsoft with some other communities, and we went through the whole thing with like a 2-day workshop where they were showing us all the Vista stuff and things like Sideshow. Remember Sideshow?
I remember Sideshow very well.
And some of the interesting things that were potentially coming with Vista that really never did come. And that, of course, was all using decent hardware, so there was never any issues. But of course, I mean, it's a fantastic backstory and something we could, we'll perhaps cover a bit more details on. So if you go look at the betas and pre-reset, and of course, I think most people know, listeners know, but if they don't, Vista was a long, drawn-out development cycle that got reset basically halfway through. And they went back to the Windows Server code base and created what we now know as Vista. But when you can go back and I've demonstrated some of these videos, some of these builds on YouTube. So some of those other builds had some really nice, interesting UI things in there that just never really worked. So they were never carried forward. But had they developed them, it would have been a very advanced user interface for its time.
Yeah, I guess were there cues from Cairo in there and Longhorn?
Yes, Longhorn was the project name, wasn't it? That they had the Longhorn reset, which I guess it was 2 or 3 years into development that they reset everything back. So I think you can try the builds up to some like build 4000 and something, were all this new code base, and then they reset it all back to an earlier code base and ported some of the features back across. But they had a lot of UI features in there, and sidebar, of course, is introduced in there, and all manner of UI effects and 3D effects and everything else that was like that. And you can see glimpses of it in the betas, but like I said, it never really worked. It got such a mess that they did the reset, and that's what became Vista. And yeah, got a bad reputation. And like you said, Windows 7 just polished it up, and it was it's one of the most popular operating systems from Microsoft.
Yes, indeed, yeah. And I think Vista only went out of extended support recently, didn't it? Because it was still around. It lingered on for a long time. Yeah,
it did. It was one of the. I had quite a few machines with Vista on, but when those, what was the EPC? What were they called? They were low. What were the netbook type thing? They weren't called netbooks there, but yeah. So none of them could ever run with Vista. And I remember hacking Vista onto that kind of thing, and I even had it on some of the little portable machines as well. But yeah, a fascinating story. And especially all the reset stuff, really, really interesting on how software projects can go wrong. I think if you're a developer or a manager of any development projects, it's an interesting one to have a look at. But I've got some Vista Longhorn beta videos up on our YouTube channel, so check out those. I think I mentioned last week that I was trying to do a video of going from Vista all the way up. In fact, I went from XP 64-bit all the way to Windows 11. I got stuck at Windows 11, surprisingly. I got to Windows, so I took Windows XP, upgraded it to Vista, upgraded it to 8, upgraded it to 10. But then, of course, on my Hyper-V environment, I couldn't upgrade it to to Windows 11 because it doesn't have TPM on the Gen 1 Hyper-V.
Well, you do know that of the Windows Vista system requirements, a trusted platform module is on there.
Is it?
For the recommended configuration, a gig of RAM, how things have moved on since then, but also yes, a trusted platform module and a touchscreen. So, in some ways, ahead of its time.
Yeah. So yeah, it was. Yeah. So I've come a bit stuck now. I've got to try and find a way of getting Windows 11 working on the Gen 1 Hyper-V. It's possible because I've done it before.
Okay, good luck.
But I'm not quite sure. But in the process of doing that, I did destroy all my snapshots checkpoints. So
that's not so good.
Yeah, but it reminded me actually when I put Vista on how all the UAC pop-ups. There are really a lot of them. They did tone them down in Windows 7 onwards. But anyway, so cutting edge news. We had a lot of Vista news last week, but I look back fondly with Vista now, especially because of I was at the Bill Gates. I just met Bill Gates at that CES as well. So very briefly, I'm not sure I remember it, but, but yeah, it was good. So moving on to some other Windows Insider news, we had a few bits actually last week. First of all, not to say Windows Insider, but from Microsoft, we did have an update for the Surface Duo 2, the January update for the Surface Duo 2, which actually did bring a couple of new features, especially if you're a pen user. It had some new sort of extra features with if you've got the Surface Slim Pen 2. But there was camera updates and quite a lot of UI improvements and touch responsiveness and some bugs taken out as well. So that was quite good. So last week was quite a busy week for the Surface Duo because we had the Android 11 for the Duo 1, and now we've got the update last week. So still working great for me. But over on the Windows side, we had a new build for Windows Insiders on the dev channel. It did have a lot of new features, but it did bring in quite a lot of features that were previously missing or A/B tested that are in there now.
Yes, I mean there was a lot of polishing in there. We had some new stuff. This is build 22543, yeah. Yeah. So we had a few we had a few new voices for a narrator and a few tweaks around there. As you say, a few things that were A/B tested now kind of standard. But I mean, I actually found the polishing to the user it's the user interface, and I know I give them a lot of stick about this, but it is good to see it becoming a lot more consistent now, and there are some generally quite useful tweaks being made to it, particularly around the flyouts for hardware indicators, and the media controls looking, so you aren't thrown back into, I appear to be back in the days of Windows 8. So yeah, I'd say it's more of an evolution. I mean, there were quite a few fixes in this build as well, weren't there?
Yeah, there were. Yeah, and like you said, there was the hardware one. There was the media UI. The little weather thing appears now as well. Yeah,
that one's there, and my taskbar is also all now nicely lined up as well. So that's good.
Oh yeah, Task Manager doesn't crash now when you go to Performance tab.
Yeah, Explorer won't crash if you drag things out of a zip file folder on in File Explorer, so it's all good.
Yeah. So
although to be fair, I hadn't really seen that one happen that much.
No, I hadn't. Interesting. When you resize the window with the Snap Assist as well, rather than it giving you a live preview of all the applications, it kind of gives you a translucent plane now, which
yes,
acrylic background,
with the icon on it too.
Yeah, which apparently is to a performance improver when you. So my Surface Go is a little bit sluggish, so I did notice it was actually a bit better with doing that style. So nice little changes in this build, but nothing major. But at this stage. They're not shipping any new features, or they're not creating a whole load of new features because they are pretty close to shipping effectively the first update to Windows 11.
Yes, I guess they must be locking it down for the first major. We say major update, but it'll be a polish because, of course, as we know, they only do the major updates once a year in the autumn now.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see how they brand this, or they even do brand it. Whether they actually do need to do any branding around this update.
I don't think they will. I think it's just going to come out as a patch Tuesday.
Yeah,
I think it's going to go to release preview next, and then it'll just appear, because there is nothing earth-shattering in this at all. You know, it looks more polished. There are a few very minor graphical tweaks. I think it'll be more things like Notepad and media player will be the things which I think garner the most attention.
Yeah.
While the rest of it, things like the flyouts being nicely rounded now and the initial information, I think probably it'll be in a release note perhaps, but it'll just be. I think it'll just be a patch Tuesday. I think they'll do nothing at all. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
but I'm thinking there'll be nothing at all.
It won't be called the February 2022 Windows 11 update or anything like that. It's just these are improvements, and
it'll be more interesting to see what they call the update at the end of the year.
Yes, I think they'll call that the October 2022 update or something like
yes,
that.
Exactly.
That's inventive naming that they'll come up with. Yeah. So these features, like I said, there's the updated apps which they released through the store anyway. In fact, I noticed I got the new media player app on my release preview device today, so they're getting ready with that. The one thing that the reason we know about this is because this was in a blog post, wasn't it, on Panos Panay talked about it in a blog post this week. It was a kind of a what's coming for Windows and the state of where they are with Windows, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of followed on from the Microsoft figures being announced, which were obviously huge. They made lots of money again. But yes, I mean, Panos Panay did a blog post where he talked about things like 1.4 monthly active devices, also 1.4 billion monthly active devices, which sounds great until you realise just how many Android devices there are out there, and obviously, when Windows Phone was unceremoniously killed, that kind of meant there's always going to be a hard limit now on how many Windows devices there can be, because you're never going to have as many PCs as you have phones. So 1.4 billion monthly active devices is not bad. I think probably around 6, 7, 8% of those are probably running Windows 11 now. At a rough guess.
I think it's I think that's right. Yeah, I don't think they talked about numbers.
No. Yeah. I mean, it's going well from what he says. He said people are accepting the upgrade offer at twice the rate they did for Windows 10, and of course we've got to remember they did force Windows 10 quite hard on people too. I think he also said that they reckon that they were going to get to the first phase where everybody's got a machine that can run it will be offered Windows 11 in the next few months. Yeah,
that's right. But like you said, with Windows 10, they really did push that as an upgrade, whereas this time it's only sort of compatible devices, so it's a much smaller subset of users.
Yeah. And I think it also says things like you've got to choose to download it, whereas I think with Windows 10 there were a few underhand ways that it just would appear on your machine where you thought you'd close the box and suddenly Windows 10 installed itself. There are certainly a lot of issues 4 or 5 years ago where Windows 10 was being forced pretty hard on people. But as you say, the joy with Windows 11 is not only are they being a lot more careful this time, but it doesn't run anywhere near as many places as Windows 10 does.
Yeah, and it's interesting on that post. I mean, obviously this is the it's not, I would say golden era, but it is a high watermark for PC usage because of the way that we've all had to adapt in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
People have given up trying, as well, perhaps not everyone, but a lot of people have given up trying to pretend they can work with an iPad and just go back to using a proper PC.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's precisely what's happened. There's been a huge upsurge because people were basically sent home. So I mean, PC sales have just gone through the roof in the last couple of years, as companies have had to. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced it too from a professional standpoint, having to equip people with PCs to work remotely, and there's also been home learning. There's all kinds of stuff. So it's been great for the PC market, definitely. I mean, and of course, there's been the silicon shortage, which hasn't helped matters. But as Panos said, they appear to have weathered that as well.
Yeah, Surface sales are up pretty well. I think they had a warning of maybe some negative growth in the previous quarter, but they actually exceeded the growth in their statements.
I mean, I think, again, this is from memory, I think out of all the segments, Surface was the least impressive growth, but it's still a growth. So
yeah, and I think if you compare that with sort of iPad sales, I think they're sort of dropping off, aren't they now?
Well, so, I mean, they are, although you got to kind of look at there's different analysts say different things about the market, because I think certainly Apple's been taking a lot, has been quite happily consuming market share because, of course, its MacBooks and things are doing particularly well as well. One shouldn't underestimate the appeal of the M1 chip.
Yeah, I wonder if you were perhaps in the market for a high-end iPad, you might just go for one of the M1 devices instead.
Yes, I mean, I must admit, I mean, it's Apple's always had this very strange thing where if you want a touchscreen, you've got to have an iPad or iPad Pro, or you can have a Mac, or you can have a MacBook, but that doesn't have a touchscreen. I've never really worked out why they simply just don't shove a keyboard on an iPad Pro and there we go, it's done. Although I suppose with the latest versions of MacBooks, that's what they've done, I guess.
Yeah,
it's all the same chip inside, isn't it now?
Yeah, I suppose in some ways that Apple have been affected in the same ways that iPad sales have gone down, but their loyal user base would perhaps buy a Mac instead because of the same thing. They're perhaps working from home and they find it for productivity that they use a MacBook instead. So
yeah,
and I guess that a few years ago people were talking about post PC all the time, and that is definitely not a thing now, is it? It's
no. The PC is back.
Yeah. It never went away in my house, but
no, the PC is definitely back. I think people, as you say, have realised that you do need a PC to work to do any proper work on, or a Mac. As in a machine with a keyboard and mouse, which unfortunately the iPad it isn't there yet. It isn't there.
Yeah, and I've still got an iPad Mini, but I never use it. I use the Surface Go a lot as a tablet. But it's not the best experience for a tablet, but for me it's good enough to I don't need a separate tablet. This is, if I'm sat on the sofa in the evening, I would use this. But then if I saw something and I think, I want to try something in Hyper-V, or I want to do a blog post, then I tend to pull out the Surface laptop instead. So, but this is good enough that I can do a bit of work on it if I need to. So
yeah, I mean I've got an iPad here, and it's as a media consumption device, it's great. As anything else, you kind of feel like it's being forced to do a thing that it wasn't really designed to do.
Yeah. But also in that, some other interesting bits in that blog post as well about the Windows 11 driving more traffic to the Windows or to the Microsoft Store.
Yeah,
it does look.
Yeah.
I don't know quite how that would be.
Well, at that point, I kind of put on my journalist hat and go, yeah, does it say twice or three times? Do you think
3?
Is that from 1 to 3, or is that from 1 million to 3 million? You always need to know when companies trot out those kind of stats. Well, yeah, but what are the actual numbers involved here? Because it's very easy to say it's 1 times or 3 times, but unless you know what the starting point, it's quite hard to know how impressive that really is.
I suppose that some of it will come from the fact that they are. The store is evolving now. It's not just UWP apps. There's real applications in there now.
Oh and there's games and all kinds of things in there now.
Yeah,
of course,
so
they're putting Notepad in there, and they're putting lots of tools in there. I mean, crikey, just downloaded Power Toys from there.
Yeah, I download. The Windows on ARM deployment tool.
Oh yeah.
That you can get to assist sort of putting Windows on. You can use it to put Windows 11 on a Lumia, which is what I used it for. You can also use it to image a Raspberry Pi with Windows 11. It's a great tool, but I've always downloaded that from GitHub. But they actually got a new version that's in the Microsoft Store now, and they recommend get it from there. And I gave that a try last week and rebuilt my Raspberry Pi with the latest version of Windows 11, and it's a great tool now. They've really done a fantastic job with that, making it really simple just to, if you've got the ISO and that's all you really need, an ISO and a media to put your Windows 11 image on for your Pi, and the one tool from the store does everything. So it actually works really well. So it's it's a kind of application you wouldn't have expected to see in the store a while ago when everything was kind of locked down to very basics that you do with P apps.
Yeah.
And of course the store looks better as well. It does, it looks better and performs better on the on Windows 11 than it did previously. Interesting though, they mentioned Panos mentions that they're bringing new experiences to Windows 11, which is what we talked about before with the taskbar improvements. Oh, the big feature is the call muting and sharing windows in Teams. But they also mentioned that it's going to be a public preview of the Android apps on Windows 11.
Yeah, so that's going to probably hit end users, I guess.
Yeah, so it's now available on, I think it's on release preview. It was dev only. It's on release preview now, but it's still US only and still the Amazon App Store as well. So, yeah, I don't. Yeah, I've used it to sideload apps, and that's been, that works. But yeah, there's not, apart from, I do use it to check the security cameras, because they've got Android apps. They have a website as well, the Arlo website. But I find that the Android app, I actually prefer it than the Arlo website. But there's not a huge use cases to run Android apps on. You think there is, and then when you do it, you think, well, okay, I'm not that desperate for it. But it's nice that the technology's there. But I think had they managed to do a proper deal with Google Play and a Google Play Store integration, which I know you can do through a bit of side loading, that kind of thing, but had they managed to do that out of the box for users, then I think it would be a lot more there would be a lot more use for it for normal users.
Yeah.
But anyway, public preview, so I guess that's just going to be in the Microsoft Store then, isn't it? You'll just get that and you can install it if you're US only. If
you're US only, and obviously with a US Amazon account.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's what actually stopped me working, because you can actually bypass the US only thing if you just pretend you're in the US. I'm not shocking anybody with that revelation, but you can't bypass the Amazon account thing because it asks for US credit cards and telephone numbers and mobile numbers, and that's I think I didn't really want to go into the sort of VPNs and virtual numbers and that kind of thing, which you would have had to do. And again, you can sideload the apps as well, so it's not, if you're really up to the job of creating US Amazon accounts and in the US, you might as well just sideload them, because you'll be able to do that no problem.
Cool.
You still got me?
Yep, still got you.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so interesting. The interesting post, and there's things coming, it seems, but there was nothing on there that was too surprising. But it has been a good quarter for Microsoft, and like you said, it wasn't massive revenue. I think it was, I can't remember the exact. It was was it around 8%, something like that, Surface growth, which which is not to be sniffed at, but that's
it's very
good.
Impressive.
Yeah. They may have a better quarter coming up, because some of the products that Microsoft launched last year, the Surface products that Microsoft launched last year that were only US only, are actually rolling out are going to be released soon in the rest of the world, including the UK. That's like the Laptop Studio.
Hurrah!
So the Laptop Studio is available the 22nd of February in the UK.
I think you told me last week it was of the absurd price it was going to go for.
Yes. These are the proper prices. So they were leaked prices. I don't know if this is I can't remember how much we said last week, but yeah, 1,449 for the i5 version. should say as well, if you're an NHS worker or I think military or a student, you can get a discount on these, which is about £100 and something for maybe, I think it was £150, something like that for the i5 version. For the 1600 quid one works out about 1400 quid. So actually quite a good deal for that. So I think there's a validation thing for your Microsoft account. But yeah, I think it's NHS workers, military, and students get those discounts. So it's worth checking if you're going to be buying one of those. I think the top end one is 2,879.
That's impressive.
Yeah, but that's for the i7 with 32 gig of RAM, 2 terabytes, and the NVIDIA RTX.
We'll call it the Jason model.
Yeah. I think the more workhorse machines, probably more useful ones. It depends on what you want to do, but like the 1,600 quid one is not that different from the Surface Pro 8 price. It's especially if you get the discount in, you actually got more or less the same thing as a Surface Pro 8 because you've got to buy the keyboard, but you do get a Slim Pen 2 as well.
Okay.
At the moment, anyway. So that's the Slim Pen, £100 and something, isn't it?
Oh, bonus.
Yeah. So yeah, nice looking device, and it's good to see that they're available, not just in the US anymore. Hopefully we'll get hold of one of them to try soon.
Nice.
Yeah. So you mentioned you got Power Toys from the store there. We're going to be talking Power Toys next week on the show. But did you say there's an update out for Power Toys?
Yeah, so it went to version 0.55, I think. And they
and what's in that then?
Well, I mean, obviously, Power Toys for those that don't know, it's got tons of interesting utilities. It appeared, I think, back in 2019, and it's now been on. It's been open sourced. It's on GitHub, and it's all those little useful things that began with things like Fancy Zones, which lets you arrange windows and a keyboard manager, what have you. The latest one has got extensions for the File Explorer preview pane, so you can see things like STL formats and also a whole load of the developer files, which is really cool. But really usefully, actually, they introduced I think late last year a mouse utility where you could sort of make the pointer grow or make it easy to see the mouse if you're perhaps visually impaired. And the mod this time is a crosshair, which basically you turn it on. It's a colossal great red crosshair appears, so you cannot miss where the mouse is. It's like, it's there. So yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, you can make all these things happen in other operating systems, and if you hunt around, you can find shareware or freeware tools that will do these sort of things for you. But it's just nice to have it all in one place. And I mean, I'll be honest, it's been a few months since I last had a serious look at Power Toys, and it's really come on nicely, particularly the settings interface as well.
Yeah, it does. It looks like a modern Windows app. It does look great, and that keyboard shortcut for the mouse is brilliant because, especially when you've got multi monitors.
Yeah.
They're not exactly where sometimes I move my desk around, so the monitors aren't exactly lined up in Windows how they are on the desk, and I'm forever like, where the bloody hell's my mouse pointer?
Exactly, kind of right-clicking madly, going, it must be here somewhere. And it's surprisingly useful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And the just like the quick run thing, that's a great little tool.
Oh yeah, and Power Toys Run is fantastic. I mean, it is quite Mac-y in some ways, I think. In terms of when you start typing and all the options appear, but it's a big improvement over just doing Windows Run. And I don't have any. Believe it or not, I've got nothing bad to say about it.
Fantastic. Well, so we will be talking about this next week as well with Clint from the Power Toys team, the program manager of the Power Toys team. So you've just got time to get your questions in, and I'll send them over. We'll talk about it next week. So we'll be talking about more. Interesting to see as well what it's like sort of working on an open source project at Microsoft. And
well, I mean, a lot of the things that Microsoft are. I mean, there's the .NET stuff, isn't there? There's PowerShell, there's Power Toys, there's a terminal. So there's quite a few. Perhaps not quite. That said, I guess .NET is quite core, isn't it? If you pardon the pun.
Yeah, and if we started the show talking about Vista, you wouldn't have expected that when we were in the Vista days, would you? That Microsoft all these
no
key components are open sourced.
No, not at all. It's. I mean, we'll see how far they go because obviously Windows is the crown jewels. But it's good to see some things appearing, and I mean, there's been a few ups and downs in recent months, but I think things like Power Toys and PowerShell, Windows Terminal, the .NET stuff are the way you hope it's going to go.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I'm going to get that, and like you said, you can get it through. There's multiple ways you can get that Power Tools. You can get it Power Toys. You can get it from the GitHub. You can do it through Windows, the store, through Microsoft Store. There's loads of different ways that you can pull it down.
Yeah, it's all there, and of course, if you feel the urge, the source code's there too.
Yeah, if you want to compile your own.
You can compile your own. I mean, I can remember when Windows Terminal first came out, and I was having to compile that myself through Visual Studio.
Yes, that's right. I've forgotten about that. I had to go doing that as well because it was like the only way you could try it out, wasn't it?
Exactly, it's on GitHub, but there were no binaries yet, and it all worked. I made it work in the end. Bit of a fight.
Yeah, but actually, you feel quite proud of yourself when you actually I've compiled a Windows program here.
Exactly. I've actually compiled a massive bit of code, and it all worked.
Yeah, that's true. And it compiled better than most of my UWP projects compiled when I was developing UWP. Don't have that problem with MicroPython. So anyway, we'll talk Power Toys next week on the show. Something I forgot to mention when I'm talking about the Surface Duo is you can now finally run apps on just like you can with the Samsung phone. So with your phone app, you previously could just do screen mirroring with the Surface Duo, the Surface Duo 2, whereas if you had a Samsung phone, you could actually run the individual apps on there. So the good news is with the update last week, they've now got the same features that Samsung users have got, and you can run apps from Surface Duo 2. So it's a bit like running the Android apps using the subsystem, but in this case they run on your phone but appear in Windows in their own right. You can pin them to the start menu, just like you can with Samsung phones as well, recent Samsung phones. But it actually works really well. So if you wanted to, you can do screen mirroring, but if I want to open one of my smart home apps, you can just launch it from the menu, your Samsung Health app or whatever. There isn't an equivalent Windows version or even a browser version. You can just launch it through the apps feature on here, and you said you can pin them as well. And it works really well. So quite pleased to see that. So finally arrived for the Surface Duo 2, a year and a bit after the initial launch, but better late than never.
Finally.
Yeah. And talking of Surface as well, Microsoft have finally updated the Surface apps and merged the Surface apps. I don't know if you know, but there was kind of a multiple apps in Windows if you had a Surface. So if you had Surface earbuds, you need the Surface Audio app, and if you have a Surface, you would get the Surface app that would show your warranty information, allow you to do the pen configuration and things, that kind of thing. And they finally sort of merged that all into one application, which I'll share my screen. I can show you. So when you do the update now, it asks you to uninstalled Audio app, and you now get the Surface app. So you can see here it shows I've got my Surface Laptop 2, the dock, and my earbuds, which are currently disconnected because I'm not using them because they won't work with Teams properly. But you can do the thing.
Is that them or is that you, Ian?
That's definitely a them thing because I've seen a few people report this.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure. Or whether it's a Teams thing. It works fine if you just want to do a Teams call with the Surface earbuds. That's no problem. But the way I want to use it, I want to use this proper USB mic and the earbuds of the Surface just as an earphone. And up until November last year, that for the last 2 years, that's worked fine, and it just stopped working. So that's why I'm on wired earbuds now. No idea why. But anyway, all the apps sort of pushed this all together now, so they've got rid of the separate ones, and it's all in one place now. So you can do your pen calibration and view your warranty information, that kind of thing. And there's also an Android version and an iOS version as well. So the Android version you need if you're going to be using the earbuds with your phone as well, which is what I use for it. So it's quite a good app. It's something sometimes you need it if you like I have my earbuds paired with multiple devices. So if usually the last PC to boot up has claim over the earphones. So if you perhaps reboot your machine and you wanted your earbuds on the other machine, then you can just go in the app and click and get it to force the pair across. So that actually works quite well. I found that works better than I've got some Samsung ones, which are really good earbuds, but sharing them with multiple devices is I found pretty difficult. It always seems really hard to swap them between devices, whereas the Surface earbuds, you just use the app. So I'm quite happy to, I can run this across 3 or 4 devices, whereas the Samsung ones, I only use it with the Duo because anything else gets too complicated with that. Anyway, so the Surface laptop, Surface app updated as well. So a busy week for the Surface team. Now, what else do we do have? Gary's not with us yet, but we do have an interview for an EV interview with Garry. So he should be coming up after we've finished our section. I don't think he's told us yet what car he's got. So he's keeping us in suspense.
The tease.
Yeah, so we'll find out. Find that on probably next week's show if he can tell us that. But we do have an interview coming up from Garry.
Excellent. Look forward to it.
Now, did we have anything else we wanted to?
I guess there was only the follow-up from. We mentioned Microsoft buying Activision.
Oh yes.
There's been the strange corporate tit for tat, hasn't there, where Sony's now gone and bought Bungie, which is a strange purchase because I'm not. I mean, help me out here, but what do Bungie do these days?
Halo. They did do Halo.
They did Halo, but Microsoft bought Bungie. And then I think Halo was bought in house. Now Halo's being done by somebody else. Bungie then did Destiny, I think.
Yes. Yes, Destiny 2.
But yeah, so it's a fairly substantial purchase. I think it's how much is it? It's 3.6 billion that Sony has. So that's quite a chunky old purchase. I mean, it's obviously not as massive as the Activision one, which I think there's rumours that the US Trade Commission are going to be looking into that particular deal from the point of view of it. It's a little bit anti-competitive. Is it really? So we'll see. But yeah, so Sony's gone and bought Bungie, that created Halo, but again, Microsoft has done that itself now. And Destiny. I can't think what else that they've done. No,
I mentioned this to gaming experts of my sons who mentioned it, who told me about it and said that it's Destiny and one other game. I forgot what it was. That they said, they said that was important to them. But they were sort of thinking that Halo was in it. And I said, no, Halo is a definite Microsoft intellectual property, so you're not suddenly going to get Halo as a PS4 exclusive.
No, not at all.
I'm interested to see. Yeah, it is a bit of tit for tat, and it still seems to be that Sony's way of exclusivity is what drives sales of the console. I can't even remember the name of the games. Sons would say, such a game is the reason why I would buy a PlayStation, because you can't get it on Xbox. So I think that strategy sells consoles.
Which is possibly why they're quite nervous about Microsoft buying Activision, I guess. But I'm trying to think what Sony's. Is it Spider-Man? Is perhaps the exclusive?
Yeah, there was another one, some Zero Dark something. I probably sound like a right old geek now.
Exactly. You see, for me, if it's not Tunnels of Doom, I've no idea what it is anymore, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it wasn't available on the Spectrum, so I'm not really sure. I think it was Zero Dark 30 or something like that, some kind of first-person shooter game. But my son said, I wish they could get that at the Xbox. It's the one game that I want to get a PlayStation for. So it still works, that strategy, but I don't know how long they can keep that up with Microsoft seemingly on the rampage of these acquisitions. But
yes, I mean, you got to wonder just how long Microsoft will keep doing Sony's Sony versions of games, which are going to clearly drive, because what Microsoft want are people going to their platform. It doesn't matter if it's in the cloud or if it's hardware, as long as people are playing. So yeah, you got to wonder, think, we'll still do Sony versions, but for how much longer, I wonder.
Yeah, and they can be quite flexible and subtle with it, can't they? Yes, you can get Call of Duty or whatever on the PlayStation if you buy it for 60 quid or 80 quid or whatever it is, but you
get it free on Game Pass.
Get it on Game Pass, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that there's loads of ways they can do stuff like that, and Game Pass works, though, doesn't it? That's the thing.
I mean, I'm on Game Pass as well now, because it's there's just all the games that I like to play are on there. So, and I like the old games like Age of Empire games and things. So it's they're all there, and it's hard to resist. I mean, you got games like flights like FS 2020 on it, the flight simulation game. So all the Forza games are there now. So it's just it's hard to resist, really.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a good strategy. I mean, imagine if Microsoft offer through the xCloud type interface a way of playing Xbox games on the PlayStation through some,
Yeah, well, I mean, that's actually something that I might try out. I wonder if I can make Xbox games play on the PlayStation browsers for xCloud, possibly. And it's the issue is with xCloud that I've run into a lot now is that, of course, you can only play games with an Xbox controller. Mm. Which is okay for some games, but other games it's really not. So, for example, I enjoy playing Sea of Thieves, which is, I think they announced a huge update this year for Sea of Thieves, and but you really need a mouse and keyboard to play. It's not as much fun as it is it's not as much fun as it is with when you're using a controller.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Is it Garry is going to join us? Oh, he was there and then he disappeared.
What happened to my camera? I don't know what happened to my camera then.
Well, it's good timing because we were just about to do the handover to your interview.
So I can talk about it. Yes, I saw that tonight. It's been a bit of a hectic evening, but I've got here in the end.
Yes, well, first most important question: do we have an announcement of the vehicle yet?
Yes. What's the vehicle?
Unfortunately, not. I thought.
But Garry.
Well, this worldwide component search shortage is affecting my choice of vehicle. So obviously I've got a deadline of when I can have my vehicle, because I'm going to lose my iPace in 2 weeks' time. So next week I'm going to have to be able to say, because I won't have a vehicle at the end of the week. But now I'm down to choices of two, depending which one can get here quickest. So I will let you know next week.
Oh, fantastic. We were just about to wrap up for this week, so it's quite good timing because you've got an interview for us.
I have, a really good interview from people we went to see last week. All about, I think I've introduced it as 1 megawatt charging last week, but it's actually far more interesting now. It's a whole sort of distributed power system, the ability to add in extra things to support the grid, and it was a fascinating day out actually I had with them, and so I will let them speak for themselves on the interview. Excellent.
And so don't forget, next week we'll be talking power toys, so still time to get your questions in about that. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Garry, before we head over to that?
No, that's all good stuff.
So, Richard, where can we find you?
Mostly on Twitter, at Richard_Speed.
Excellent. And Garry, where can we find you for the breaking news?
At Garry WMA.
Excellent. Well, let's go straight to the interview.
Today you join me at Voltempo, a small Birmingham-based British firm with very big ideas in the charging market. In the picture behind me you can see the prototype chargers that they've been looking at there, what they call hyperchargers, capable of up to a megawatt of charging for any vehicle in the future which might be able to accept that. And that may not be as far away as we would possibly think. I mean, they're talking maybe 4 or 5 years down the road. In fact, they have a prototype vehicle here which can actually take a megawatt of charge if it was available to them. So it's been really interesting talking to people here. The approach they're going is kind of similar to the Kempower approach we saw a few months back, which is the idea of that each of these units is independently just really a cable management system. The actual brains is happening in a box which is attached to them. What's really interesting is if you look at this picture again, is the plinth they're showing at the bottom there is actually where all the wires go to those units. So it's very easy to replace the units and without having to actually do lots of groundworks. Makes it a very attractive proposition to people. Anyway, we're talking to my CEO fairly shortly and get some more information. Hi, thanks for taking the time to talk to me tonight. It's been a really interesting day, I have to say. Looking at your prototype equipment, it's been very intriguing what you're actually doing and some great innovation, I think.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, we've been working on EV charging. I've been working on EV charging systems since 2006. So this is very much an evolution. And back in 2010, I came up with an idea, just a simple idea at the time, for a centralised EV charging hub using battery backup and everything else. And it was at the time, there wasn't the vehicles out there wasn't a requirement for it and everything else, but as a concept, it was something that I felt had legs even then. And it's been sort of a journey since then, really, to create a charging hub in a viable way that makes sense for rapid installation across public charging networks and also for fleets.
So, what's the unique selling point of your product, effectively?
Okay, so what we're doing is instead of having lots of individual charging points, we've got one big centralised charging system, and we then split that power out to multiple vehicles. So if you've got 5, 10, 20 vehicles you need to charge, one centralised charger, and then a unique distribution system to charge up multiple vehicles from that one charger.
And talk about the distribution system. One thing that's really impressed me was the lack of groundworks to do distribution.
Absolutely. So one of the big issues at the moment, if you're putting in lots of charging points, every individual site you're doing is bespoke. So somebody will sell you the charging points, but you've got to design the whole electrical setup for that site, and you're digging holes in the ground and running trenches and putting cables through trenches and so on and so forth. And if you then want to change things in the future, well, you can't. It's fixed to the ground, So our concept was, okay, let's get rid of all that disruption and mess and design a whole system, the whole site in a factory, then turn up on site and drop it off. And that meant, for that to work, you had to get rid of underground cabling. So what we've come up with is an above-ground trunking system with all the cables running through that trunking and then going through to the individual charging connectors, charge points themselves, through that above-ground trunking. So it will look like a footpath, basically, or a pavement in the ground, but actually it's a trunking system. The benefits of that is that you can build it really quickly. The one through there took us 2 hours to assemble initially, so it's really quick. So you could put together a whole site in a day. In that regards, if you want to pick up and move it, you can. If you want to reconfigure it, you can. If you want to add more charging points, you can. It makes it very, very flexible for the future.
So like now, when we're stuck with loads of 50 kilowatt chargers, that wouldn't be an issue because you just drop another.
Yeah.
But if something better came along in the future, you just swap it out.
Absolutely.
But you've actually allowed for the future in quite a big way anyway. I mean, the amount of kilowatts you're talking about being able to put through these things seems impressive.
Absolutely. So at the moment, the fastest EV charging out there is 250 to 350 kilowatts, and there's no vehicle out there that can charge quicker than that, but they're on their way. So when you're looking at heavy goods vehicles, then a 350 kilowatt charge, that's still an hour and a half charge time. If you really want that down to sort of 20-30 minutes, now you're looking at sort of 750 to a megawatt charging. So it's going to be needed. So in our system, the central core can be up to a megawatt, and in future we'll have higher, so to 2 megawatts and even 4 megawatts in the future as well. But at the moment, of course, nobody can charge at a megawatt, so that's why splitting the power out works well. So if you can imagine a site where you had maybe 20 heavy goods vehicles, Eddie Stobart says, well, don't have one truck, they have 20 at a site. So you say, right, okay, we'll have a charging system which can charge 20 vehicles. And it's a megawatt central charger. That means that each vehicle on average it takes 50 kilowatts. It takes all night to charge, but that's fine because you're only allowed to, as a driver, you're only able to use your truck for 10 hours or so a day anyway. So you've got plenty of time to charge up slowly. But during the day, if your truck driver turns up, you want to turn him around and get him out quickly. So you then put 350, 500, 1 megawatt of power into that one vehicle and charge it up and get it on its way quickly. So that's the logic. You need to be able to use your charging systems in multiple ways. But of course, also electric vehicles. We know that the batteries have been getting bigger and bigger over the last few years, and that will continue. But what we're also seeing is the batteries themselves can be charged faster. So at the moment, typically, it doesn't matter whether you've got a Nissan Leaf or a Jaguar I-Pace or a Porsche Taycan, from flat to full takes 35 minutes to charge up, give or take. So the batteries themselves aren't being charged any quicker. It's just you've got a bigger capacity of power because you've got a bigger battery to charge in the first place. But what we're going to start seeing is those charge times themselves start to drop. So we had an investor a couple of years ago who said, look, where's this going? At what point do we get down to charging at the same time as you can put petrol into a car? And we thought, well, okay, technically the cells are available at the moment to do that, to charge in 6 minutes. But actually putting that together into a pack, into a vehicle, and then creating the charging system that can work that fast, and the currents we're talking about, 500, 800 amp type currents, how do you manage that? So we built a battery that could charge that quickly using lithium titanate cells. It was a prototype. It isn't. Don't expect us to go down to your dealership tomorrow and buy a car that can charge this quickly. We built a pack. We put it into an electric truck, and we built the charging system that could charge that quickly. Now it's scaled down, but we now know how to charge at 800 amps easily. Now that sort of information is going to be really useful for when you're charging up your trucks in 20 minutes or 10 minutes, charging cars in 6 minutes. In the future, charging ferries, cross-channel ferries and shipping, aircraft. An aircraft on the ground is an expensive thing. You want to charge it quickly and get it out there. So we've got a system that is scalable so that you can charge vehicles in that sort of time. And we think that for niche applications, we could potentially see vehicles on the road that can charge that quickly within 3 to 5 years. For example, ambulances. Ambulances don't drive 200 miles to go to pick up a patient, take them to the hospital. They do short journeys, but they use 24/7. So you need to be able to recharge really quickly because you need to be able to use that vehicle straight away. So you look at an ambulance, they go out, they pick somebody up, they take them to the hospital. The ambulance then goes to a cleaning area for 15 minutes to be cleaned and restocked before it goes out again. That's 15 minutes to recharge the vehicle. If you can recharge in that time, you can keep using that vehicle 24/7. There's other applications, not just for the blue lights like ambulance and police and fire, but for airport shuttles where you have a bus. They don't drive 200 miles. They go to car park 1, car park 2, car park 3, and then the terminal, and then back again. But they're doing that for 20 hours a day. The problem with an electric bus is they cost £100,000 more than a diesel bus. So the payback on it is really difficult.
That's the battery, isn't it?
And a lot of that is down to the battery. But if you could have a very much smaller battery, but keep charging it up, 30 times a day, or 20 times a day, or whatever, now you can get the price of the battery down so it's the same as the diesel vehicle. So suddenly you've got an unlimited range, if you like, because all you're ever doing is very short distances. But you've got the use that you need out of it, but you've also reduced the cost of the hardware, so you can get electric vehicles into sites which have been cost prohibitive up till now.
Yeah, that's a really good use case.
It is.
I do remember talking to someone from the University of Oregon a few years back about, and he was arguing that actually the best approach for electric vehicles was smaller batteries rather than big batteries, and have fast charging and lots of it. Now, obviously, your infrastructure is really suited for sort of, I think, a service station. So, can you just the delivery? I was thinking different dwell times, for example. I mean, there's different scenarios where you wouldn't want necessarily to charge quite that quickly.
Yes. Yeah, so absolutely. So we can set things up so that there can be a maximum charge speed if you want to slow everybody down. So if you wanted to put charging in, and you've got a number of shops, for instance, you want people to go shopping for half an hour or whatever, you could adjust it to slow it down if you wanted to. But also you could set up priorities. So if you wanted people to be able to pay extra to get a priority charge, then you could do all of that in there as well. So there's all sorts of things you can do to make it cost justifiable for different cases.
I know you've also done a lot of look about the grid supply, because obviously there's big challenges there.
Just a few.
we were talking about some on our show a couple of weeks ago. The motorway services particularly are a big challenge because of where they're located.
Yeah.
Most of them are between conurbations, they're not actually and a lot of them haven't got very good grid supplies at all.
Correct.
For what they've already got without taking EV charging into the mix. And your system allows to enhance that, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. So most motorway services, they've got the charging they've got, whatever it happens to be. If you wander around the back of the services, more often than not, you'll find a diesel generator there. Yeah, absolutely. So and they're big ones, they're not little ones. So quite often you'll see this building and there'll be a rumbling sound from inside it, and that's our power station. It's running on diesel. So that happens at an awful lot of sites. So not great. But of course, most motorway services are busy during the day and they're quiet at night. Okay, so and because they're in the middle of nowhere, they're surrounded by green fields. So why don't you cover some of those green fields with solar and some batteries, and you could have entirely 100% green energy, EV charging, because you've got a big solar farm next door. So what we have within our system, because we've centralised the power system, we can manage the multiple power inputs centrally. One of the biggest issues, we put a system in at an airport a few years ago, and we put in batteries to go in with the grid because the local grid wasn't powerful enough. And the problem was with individual charging points, they ended up fighting each other for the available power. And you see this with charging points today, where you've got 5, 6, 10 charging bays. They might be advertised as 150 kilowatt chargers. You plug in, you get 40 kilowatts. And you think, why? And it's actually because the chargers themselves are fighting each other for the available power, and it brings all the chargers speeds down really, really dramatically. Our system doesn't do that because we have one central system which then splits the power out. You don't get that fighting. But we also have a patented system for 2 power inputs. So one can be the grid, and the other one can be something else. So that could be batteries, it could be a solar farm, or both combined together. In a worst case scenario, you could actually have a system where you have a diesel generator to boost the grid. But what you could then do, for instance, firstly you'd use biodiesel, or you try and find a better fuel for that, but you would prioritise the grid. If the grid can't cope, you'd have a battery pack in there as well, so that the grid could trickle charge the battery at quiet times. So the battery then delivers more power, and if that runs out of power, runs out of energy, then you kick up the diesel generator, which provides the additional boost of power there as well. So yes, you still have diesel generation, as we already have at motorway services, but at least you're doing it far, far less. In the medium term, you'd hope that the grid can either catch up, or you've got time to put your solar farm in. So that means that you can put something in right now today, and it might not be as green as you'd like it, but it's there, and you can be getting the green plan in place at the same time. You can rent generators by the week, so you put something in quickly, but then get rid of it as quickly as you possibly can as well. So it's a step, if you like, a stepping stone. We've got that opportunity if required.
So to get any source of energy into it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Clever stuff. So where are you in the development stage at the moment?
Well, we finished our main development. So we have a prototype system running here in Birmingham, which is currently for 3 vehicles. We're using that to fine-tune the software side of things. So we've got our software developers getting the management systems completed on that. We will be putting in our first system into Tyseley Energy Park in Birmingham at the end of April, and that will be initially for 4 vehicles, and then we'll expand that to 12 in June. So that's the time frame for our first system. And in terms of rollout, we're talking to a number of customers. and we should have our first customer sort of sorted out in the next couple of weeks for a rollout across. Well, it's either going to be in Wales or it's going to be in the Midlands. This is going to be our first customer.
People in Wales would love that because it's always seen as a bit of a charging.
It is, yeah. I'm getting married in Wales at Easter, and the place we're getting married at, there's no rapid charging within a 30-mile radius of where we're going to be. So
it's a
not good.
So actually, while we're talking about installers, I mean, for installers, you've got some amazing tools. I was blown away by your spreadsheet. I can see this. So you've had some installs and people around coming in today, and I can see that they were really impressed by the charging. But actually, the ability to analyse the infrastructure that you have in your spreadsheet was the thing which really blew the whole.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've got a big issue as an industry. We need to put in charging systems in really, really quickly. The rate of installation at the moment just isn't fast enough. So we can do that in two ways. In terms of the manufacturing side, we manufacture the whole thing in a factory and bring it to site and drop it off, rather than sort of designing every site individually. That speeds that up. But it's also important to identify the right sites in the first place. So if you look at where petrol stations are today, some of them are in perfect locations for EV charging points, but a lot of them aren't. And you need a different type of location. So we've got a tool that allows you to, you type in the postcode of a site, you can identify where the site is, you can do a rough layout of where you want the charging points on that site, work out where all the cables need to go. You can then link into the national grid to find out where the local substations are and where the cables are, and so on and so forth, so you can work out if there are any issues on that side, have you got the capacity to do it, and if so, what the likely cost is of putting the system in there. You then analyse how many vehicles are driving up and down the road next door, and when they're driving, with daytime, evening, nighttime, weekends, all that sort of stuff. And from that you can identify how many of those vehicles are hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and how many are full electric. And we can then estimate what those figures look like for the number of vehicles on the road going forward to the next 20 years. So, because obviously that number is going to go quite rapidly. So from that we can then say, right, okay, approximately 2% of all battery electric vehicles and 0.2% of hybrids would like the ability to charge up at that site. And you can change those figures depending on what site it is. You can then say, right, this is how much profit I want to make on my electricity when I'm selling it, and it will then work out what the payback is of putting the charging system on that site for the next 15 years. So you can see whether it works or not. That whole process takes 15 minutes. Now, everyone else who's been working on that sort of system telling me that takes 2 to 3 weeks per site to do, and we can do it in 15 minutes. So if you have a company that's got 50 forecourts, 200 forecourts, whatever, and they want to analyse them, we can do it really, really quickly and identify what the benefits are, what the payback is, and so on and so forth. And what we're finding is, in most cases, if you've got a petrol forecourt, you can earn more money by putting in EV charging into a proper hub than you ever can selling petrol.
Because the margins on petrol
The margins on petrol are poor, and in fact, even if you're only making sort of 10 pence per kilowatt hour on electricity, you're making more than you are on litres of petrol. So very quickly you've got a very profitable model there. And of course you've got people there for sort of 20 minutes to half an hour. So you can sell them coffee and all these sorts of things.
Which have even bigger margins.
Which have even bigger margins. And that means that the petrol station of the future is going to be a very different type of model than it is today. It's going to be more like a miniature version of the service station you get at motorways. There'll be things you can go and eat. It's going to be shops to browse in and all those sorts of things to make it a much more friendly place to be, rather than the rather austere petrol stations we have at the moment.
Yeah, and that again comes down to sort of drive times, and then we talk about. There's always been this thing about getting to charge as fast as you fuel, but actually in some ways you don't want to do that, because most of the times with an EV driver, when you take a break, you charge when you're doing something else.
Yes.
You don't make a trip to go charging. And unlike a petrol car, where you tend to go make a trip to get petrol.
Yes.
Charging occurs where you are.
Yes.
We've got to. So I think that's quite an interesting concept. And,
It is. Yeah.
And I know to talk to some people in the industry, the idea of actually very fast charge times is something they almost don't want because the revenue streams are lessened.
Indeed, but at the same time, what we've had with EV charging up till now is that EV charging infrastructure has always been chasing the cars. They've not been as quick as the cars. So I can't believe that people are still installing 50 kilowatt chargers, and they are. Yet every electric car available on the market today charges quicker than 50 kilowatts.
Yeah.
And if you've got a car with a 100 kilowatt hour battery, you're charging for 2.5 hours or so to charge it from 50 kilowatts.
Which I think is where the point comes in. If you can charge fast, then you can expand the battery size, which means again you've got that longer journeys before you actually need to make that.
Absolutely. So and there are companies. There's a startup company at the moment called EV Centres, who are looking at the idea of what does a petrol station of the future look like? It's similar to what GridServe are doing, but on a smaller scale, so that it can be rolled out more quickly. So they're looking at sites where you always have somewhere to eat and drink. There'll be a business centre potentially, a park for the kids perhaps, a farm shop. And making it local so that it feels like when you go to somewhere, it's a little bit of an occasion to go there. And their research suggests that people will want to spend half an hour there. So actually, you might end up staying longer there than your car needs.
Yeah, actually, it happens to be all the time at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but on the other hand, if you've got an electric car and you've got somewhere to be, and let's face it, if you're on the road, you've got somewhere to be, then you want to get that charged up as quickly as possible. So that the ability to plug in and charge in 6 minutes and clear off again is going to be important.
I guess that's an option. It makes some sense in some.
Yeah, the way you would do that and the way you put it on our system is you say, right, okay, for most people, most cars will charge in half an hour, so we'll base it on that. If you've got a car that can charge in 6 minutes, you can pay a premium and have that rapid charge. And that's so that way on the occasion you do need to charge really quickly and get out, you'll be able to do that
extra, which makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Because obviously that offsets the loss of revenue that the cafe or whatever's okay.
Absolutely.
Clever stuff.
Yeah.
So all of this is really clever stuff. I've been very impressed with what I've seen so far. So let's just talk about your actual charging infrastructure. So obviously each of the boxes is fairly done in its own right because everything's in the container.
Absolutely.
So they're more or less just cable containers, is it?
Pretty much. Yeah. So there's a small controller because you've got the screen on there, and if you're the payment system, so for credit card payment and everything else, that would be built in onto that as well. But the vast majority of that space inside is fresh air, and the reason for it being fresh air is that you want to be able to want the cable to retract inside the unit when it's not in use. So a lot of charging points today, you end up with cables strewn all over the floor and it looks a mess, and the cables drop on the floor and the connectors get damaged. What the number one reason for rapid charging points being out of commission is because the cables are damaged and the connectors are damaged. So what we wanted to do is to be able to have the cable retract out of the way, and when it's not in use. So we spent a lot of time working on getting that design right. Some little tweaks still to do, but we're pretty close now. And it keeps it neat and tidy, and it also keeps it safe.
Yeah.
So another element of that is the styling we have on it at the moment. We can customise it. So if we have a customer who wants something different, they want their own branding on there and everything else, or different shape or whatever, we can change that very, very quickly. So. And design something different.
Well, I guess actually that's a very valid point. The fact that you're not having to put lots of electronics inside it means you can come up with varied shapes.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can come up with something different for a multi-storey car park, for example, and we also have the ability potentially, if we could have the system containerized, 20-foot container with the charging points, charging handles on the container itself. So that you cluster the vehicles around the container. So if you're a fleet, for instance, and you wanted to be able to trial EVs within your fleet, but you needed to have some rapid charging facilities in there, we could pick up a container, take it to the site, drop it off, connect it to whatever grid's available, maybe back it up with a generator or batteries, and you can trial EV charging. Or if you were at motorway services and there was a major power system failure or whatever, we could have a backup system delivered on site within the next day or so, and you can keep going. So it gives us some flexibility of what we can do there.
It's interesting. A lot of the conversations I have around public charging, but obviously fleet charging is equally important. And you mentioned the Eddie Stokes and commercial vehicles, I think, are going to be a big area of expansion.
It is, because you can't slow charge a heavy goods vehicle. You've got a 400 kilowatt hour battery, you plug that into your 13 amp socket, then 4 weeks later you're fully charged. It's 3 to 4 weeks, it's crazy. So you have to have DC rapid charging in that. Now, from a public point of view, public charging point of view, you put motorway services rapid charging in for HGVs, your return on investment is huge. You can get a payback in 2 years, 2 to 3 years, simply because each battery can take 300, 400 kilowatt hours of electricity, so the revenue is significant. But also from the your truck depots and your overnight stops and things like that, having a flexible charging system in there is important, because you need that ability when the trucks get bigger batteries and can charge more and need more power. You need to be able to deliver that. The Tesla Semi heavy goods vehicle is rumoured, and it is only a rumour, to be able to charge at 1 megawatt, just under. And ours is the only system that you could charge that faster, other than potentially some of the stuff that Tesla are working on behind the scenes. But within the next year or two, we could have trucks and heavy goods vehicles charging at that sort of speed. But you wouldn't need that all the time. So you could have the one system that could charge 20 vehicles at night at 50 kilowatts each, that's a megawatt. And then during the day, when the truck turns up and needs a quick splash and dash, you can provide that as well.
Yeah, which is really important, I think. Yeah. All right, thanks so much for your time today. That's been
my pleasure.
And I have really enjoyed seeing what you've done, and it looks really impressive, and I can't wait to see actually going into production and that out there.
Fantastic.
So we'll catch up later on and see how you've got on, but I think it's really good. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
That looks great. That's perfect.